Ever get that feeling? Like you're scrolling and scrolling through endless feeds of stuff, and it's all just dot simulations.
Hmm.
Like seriously, when you're 2 levels deep in viral TikToks about a Netflix show based on a true crime podcast,
Hmm.
makes you wonder what is even real anymore.
You're definitely onto something there. It's like we're living in a hall of mirrors, you know?
Right.
Hard to tell what's a reflection and what's the actual deal.
Exactly. And it's wild to think that someone was already grappling with this back in the early 80s,
Oh, yeah.
way before smartphones and social media took over.
Absolutely.
We're diving into the work of Jean Baudrillard today
Yeah.
and his book, Simulacra and Simulation.
Right.
Surprisingly relevant to our digital age,
Yeah,
even though it was written pre-internet.
it's true.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing how prescient he was.
Hmm.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be breaking down his ideas. No need for a philosophy degree, I promise.
Hmm.
To help you make sense of this world of simulations we're swimming in.
Think of it this way. Baudrillard gives us the tools to decode the matrix,
Ooh, I like
to
it.
understand how these simulations work and how they shape our perceptions of reality.
I like it. So first up, let's talk about Baudrillard's concept of the simulacrum.
Okay.
Sounds complicated, but
Yeah.
it's actually pretty straightforward.
It is.
Okay.
In essence, a simulacrum is a copy that becomes detached from the original.
Okay.
Think of those artificial sweeteners.
Oh, yeah.
They mimic the taste of sugar, but have no real connection to the actual plant.
Okay, I get that. But it's more than just artificial flavors, right? Baudrillard takes this idea to a whole other level.
Absolutely. He argues that these simulacra, they don't just imitate, they start to replace reality altogether, creating a kind of hyper-reality that feels more real, more captivating than the real thing.
That's a bit trippy. But I kind of see what he means.
Think about Disneyland.
Oh, yeah.
Baudrillard uses it as a classic example. It's a meticulously crafted fantasy world, right?
Right.
But what's fascinating is that by presenting itself as a simulation, it makes everything outside Disneyland seem less real in comparison.
Whoa, that's deep. So it's like Disneyland is fake, we know that.
Right.
But because it's so over the top and immersive, it makes the real world outside feel somehow less real.
Exactly. In Baudrillard's words, Disneyland is presented as imaginary in order to make us believe that the rest is real, whereas all of Los Angeles and the America that surrounds it are no longer real, but belong to the hyper-real order and to the order of simulation.
So basically he's asking, is Disneyland the fantasy or is it all of America?
Yes.
It's like that moment you realize the map isn't the territory, but then you start to wonder what even is the territory anymore?
You got it. And here's where things start to get really interesting. Baudrillard argues that this endless proliferation of simulacra, this constant stream of images and information, it doesn't lead us to greater understanding.
Yeah, if anything, it just makes things more confusing. You're bombarded with so much information, it's hard to know what to believe, what to trust.
Precisely. Baudrillard calls this the desert of meaning. The sense that as information multiplies, actual meaning starts to evaporate. It's like we're drowning in data but starving for wisdom.
It's not just that we're passively consuming simulations, we're losing our grip on what things mean.
And Baudrillard doesn't let mass media, technology, and even institutions like universities off the hook. He sees them all as playing a role in this implosion of meaning.
Okay, so how does that work exactly? Can you give me an example?
Let's take the news, for example. Baudrillard was particularly struck by how the media covered horrific events, like the Holocaust. He argued that instead of fostering genuine understanding, the sheer volume of images and information ended up distancing us from the event's true horror.
Right, it's like sometimes you can become desensitized to tragic news.
Right.
You see so many headlines, so many images, that it's hard to process it all emotionally.
Exactly. And he saw this again in the coverage of events like the 3 Mile Island nuclear incident.
Right.
He compared the media frenzy surrounding the event to the release of the disaster movie The China Syndrome just weeks earlier.
Wow.
It's as if the hyper-real, almost cinematic portrayal of the event overshadowed the reality of what was actually happening.
So it's like we're living in a movie, but we don't even realize it.
That's the question Baudrillard wants us to grapple with. We've talked about how these simulacra distort our perception of reality and contribute to this desert of meaning. But Baudrillard doesn't stop there. He also delves into the impact of this simulated world on our physical selves.
And this is where his analysis of Crash, G.G. Ballard's novel, comes into play.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Scratch is a pretty intense exploration of desire, death, and car crashes, to put it mildly.
It's definitely not your average beach read,
No.
but what does it have to do with simulation?
Well, Baudrillard is interested in how Crash portrays this unsettling fusion of technology and the human body in a hyper-real world.
It's like technology becomes eroticized in this really strange and disturbing way, almost a merging of flesh and metal.
Exactly. While we won't get into the nitty-gritty details here, it's important to remember that Crash isn't about conventional ideas of sexuality or violence.
Right, it's something far weirder and more disturbing.
Much.
Yeah.
Baudrillard suggests that Crash introduces us to a new mode of non-perverse pleasure, a strategic organization of life that starts from death. It's not that he's endorsing this idea, of course. What he's getting at is that in this hyper-real world, even our experiences of sex and death can become desensitized, simulated, almost mechanical.
Right.
It's a stark example of how deeply simulation can infiltrate our lived experience.
So we're living in this world where reality, I don't know, feels increasingly simulated,
Yeah.
where meaning is hard to come by, and even our bodies are becoming all intertwined with technology in these strange and unsettling ways. It's a lot to process.
Yeah, you can say that again. And it's precisely this pervasiveness of simulation, this sense of a world unmoored from meaning, that leads us to Baudrillard's, well, kind of bleak outlook.
Yeah, this is where things get a bit heavy.
Yeah.
If meaning is basically on life support in this hyper-real world,
Right.
is there any escape? Like, can we have authentic experiences in a world that's just saturated by simulations?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
Baudrillard himself doesn't exactly offer a pep talk on this front.
Right.
But even in his kind of bleak diagnosis, there are these hints of possible resistance.
Okay, so let's dig into that. What are some ways we can, I don't know, resist the pull of the simulated world, even if it feels like an uphill battle?
One concept Baudrillard brings up is symbolic exchange.
Okay.
It's a way of interacting with the world that isn't driven by consumerism or the logic of buying and selling, but operates on this much deeper, more symbolic level.
So instead of chasing the fleeting satisfaction of buying the latest gadget or chasing likes on social media, it's about finding meaning and connection in something more genuine, more primal.
You got it. Think about it this way. Imagine you give a close friend a handmade gift.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not about the monetary value. It's the thought, the effort, the symbolism behind it that makes it meaningful. That's symbolic exchange in action.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's like those moments of genuine human connection that break through the noise of the hyperreal. But how does this resistance play out on a larger scale? Does Baudrillard offer any other examples?
He does, and this might sound a bit out there,
Okay.
but one of the most intriguing examples he uses is the silent resistance of animals.
Animals. Really?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. How do animals resist simulation?
Well, think about it. Animals, they don't operate within the realm of human language and symbols.
Right.
Yet they clearly experience the world. They communicate. They form complex social structures.
That's true. They don't use iPhones or post on Instagram, but they have their own way of being in the world.
Exactly. And Baudrillard sees this as a powerful form of resistance.
Okay.
Animals, they exist outside of our systems of meaning and simulation.
Right.
They challenge our very human-centric way of seeing things.
So it's like their very existence disrupts our, I don't know, neatly constructed hyper-reality. They remind us that there are other ways of being, other ways of experiencing the world.
Precisely. Animals demonstrate that meaning doesn't have to be something we manufacture or impose. It can be something more primal, more intuitive.
I'm starting to see what Baudrillard is getting at. It's not about, I don't know, rejecting technology entirely.
Right.
Or going off the grid, but about being more conscious,
Yes.
more critical of the simulated world and our place in it.
Absolutely. And while Baudrillard doesn't necessarily offer a step-by-step guide to navigating this terrain, his work encourages us to question our assumptions, to be aware of the seductive power of simulations, and to be on the lookout for those moments of genuine connection and meaning, however fleeting they might be.
It's about reclaiming our agency in a world that often feels designed to, I don't know, keep us passively scrolling, liking, and consuming.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we engage with this world,
Right.
how we consume information, how we define our own experiences.
So instead of getting caught up in like whether something is real or simulated, maybe the more important question is, what meaning do I find in this?
Yeah.
Regardless of its origin.
Now you're thinking like Baudrillard. It's about recognizing that even in a hyper-real world, we have the power to shape our own narratives,
Yeah.
to find meaning and connection in unexpected places.
I love that. It's empowering. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the concept of the simulacrum and this desert of meaning to the disturbing ways technology is blurring the lines between our bodies and the simulated world. And we even touched on some potential ways to, like, resist the pull of the hyperreal.
And while Baudrillard's perspective can seem a bit heavy at times, I think it's important to remember that he also offers these glimmers of hope, these possibilities for resistance and authentic experience, even within a world that's saturated by simulations.
It's like he's giving us a flashlight in dark, confusing funhouse.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the funhouse, but at least we can see where we're going a little bit.
Yeah. I like that analogy. It's about understanding the mechanics of the funhouse, the ways these simulations operate, so we can move through them more consciously, more critically.
Right. But before we wrap up this deep dive into simulacra and simulation, I want to leave our listener with one final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Something to chew on as they go about their day.
Hit me with it.
Okay, so if we're living in an increasingly simulated world, if our perceptions are constantly being shaped by images, information, then what does it even mean to seek real experiences? What would those experiences even look like?
Now that is the question.
Right.
I'm not sure even Baudrillard has a definitive answer for that.
Right. But I think it's a question worth asking ourselves. Especially in this day and age, it forces us to confront the nature of our own reality, the meaning we find in our experiences and the choices we make in a world where the lines between the real and the simulated, well, they're becoming increasingly blurred. It really makes you think, like, what does real even mean anymore when we're surrounded by such convincing simulations?
Yeah, it's a question that gets at, like, the very core of our being, in a way. And that's what's so brilliant and frustrating about Baudrillard. He doesn't give us easy answers. He just forces us to confront these big, often uncomfortable questions about, like, the nature of reality and our place in it.
Definitely not light beach reading, that's for sure. But I think it's so crucial, especially now, because like we were saying, this isn't some, abstract philosophical debate. It's about understanding the forces that are literally shaping our everyday lives.
Exactly. Like, once you start to see the world through this lens of simulacra and simulation, you can't unsee it.
Right.
It's like you've unlocked this whole new level of awareness.
Totally. Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into simulacra and simulation, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away? Like, what's the most crucial insight that Baudrillard offers for navigating this crazy, hyper-real world of ours?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is this. Understanding how these systems of simulation work. That's the first step toward reclaiming our agency in a world that often feels designed to keep us, passive and consuming.
Yeah. It's like that scene in The Matrix. Once Neo takes the red pill,
Right.
And he sees the code for what it is,
Yeah.
he's not just this passive player anymore.
Exactly. It's about recognizing how images, information, technology, all of it shapes our desires, our perceptions, even our sense of self. And once you see that, you can start making more conscious choices about how you engage with this world.
So to our listener, we encourage you, keep digging into these ideas. Pick up a copy of Simulacra and Simulation. Maybe check out some of the artists and thinkers Baudrillard references. But most importantly, just start questioning, Question the reality that's being presented to you.
Remember, the map is not the territory. The hyperreal is not the real. And the power to define your own reality, your own experience, that lies within you.
And that is a wrap on this deep dive into Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation. We hope this conversation helps you make a little more sense of our increasingly simulated world. And until next time, happy decoding.
This podcast was generated by NotebookLM. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more content. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm will notice me.